Hello, my name is Sam McLean, and today I will be analyzing and I will be taking a look at three separate movements from three separate Chopin nocturnes. As I said before, they're all done by Chopin, and I will be talking about many of Chopin's conventions that he held for the nocturnes. I will also be talking about what styles he did, like the typical characteristics, and each of these nocturnes is in a different key. It has like a different time signature, it has a different structure, it has a different mood. So I will be talking about how each of these either follows or breaks the conventions of a typical Chopin nocturne in a day. They're all from the Romantic era, by the way. And I will also be talking about the many harmonic procedures that we learned in the course that we can find in these pieces, and I will believe that this will go very well. So each piece contains a truckload of harmonic procedures that we learned. And this includes, but is not limited to, modal mixture, flat 2 chords, flat 3 chords, mixture pivots, applied chords of applied chords. That'd be sharp F5s, augmented triads, ninths, 13ths, flat ninths, chromatic scales, the flat 6/4/5/3 pedal, a lot of pedals, by the way, a lot of one pedals. There's a lot of cadential 6/4s and a lot of pedal 6/4s. A lot of chromatic scales, tierce to Picardy shows up, augmented triads, as I said, augmented 6 chords. We find a lot of German, French, and Italian. Possible common tone diminished 7s, passing 6/4s, and many, many enharmonic modulations. I should probably go over the structure of each piece before I begin. I will start with Nocturne OP9 number 2 in E-flat major. This is the first one that I will be doing. This is possibly Chopin's most popular piece, definitely. I wouldn't say in his lifetime, but I would say definitely in the Romantic era, this is Chopin's most popular piece. Okay, so the structure of that, as you can see on the sheets that I've uploaded, is we have a section A. We have a section A from bars 1 to 4, but we also, A, but then we also, A kind of continues the first time and repeats itself in bars, I believe in bars 5 to 8. That would be an E-A development, I guess, even though it doesn't really develop too many times, because, we're just starting out. And that would be primarily in E-flat major. Then we have section B. Section B begins here. Section B begins on measure 9, and in the key of B-flat major, which we pivot to. Then we have the return of A development in measure 13 here. And then we have, as you'll see I've written on the score, we have the return of B. Nothing actually changes in B. When it returns, it really does not change. There's no development. Then we have A development section returns once again. And by now you could probably call this part the extended coda, because this is literally just how the piece ends. It would be a regular coda, but it's actually this coda contains elements of both B and of A. And chordally speaking, it contains both of them. And finally, it ends along many, 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 many chromatic scales. Is like that little pattern and eventually goes down on a 1. So now I will be talking about the structure of my second piece, Nocturne OP72 number 1, E minor. That's this one. So we have an intro, which is 1 bar long, only 1 bar. And as you'll know, it's an A minor. Then we have the A section. It's technically, yeah, this is the A section, also in E minor. But we eventually pivot to B, sort of. Well, kind of. We go to B minor, which is the dominant of A minor. And the pivot was actually somewhat hard to write out, because I couldn't tell which place it was pivoting at. I guess you could say it's a 5-1 pivot, but you can also make the case that it's a major 3 to major 6. That is also valid. It's right next to the Italian chord. I will discuss that later on. But then it goes back to E just as quickly with the 1-5 pivot. This is technically the A development section, even though it doesn't really develop as much. It's just more of a continuation of A. And there's slight differences, and it does not pivot to B minor. It doesn't. It's about half as long. It's just E. It's E minor the whole way through. Then we have C. Many people say that this is not a section, but I am inclined to disagree because we actually do pivot to a different key for a very short period of time, and then we're led into the B section. So I call this C. And you can tell we are because we go from B minor to C major, like really quickly. With the flat 2 that leads into C major. But just as soon, in bar 17, we're led back to B minor. This was actually kind of a poor choice for a pivot, but it was actually, I could not tell if we were actually going back to B minor until we got to the cadential. And I don't think that the half diminished 2 would be a good place to pivot either. Even enharmonically. So I decided that, as terrible as it is, minor 3 to minor 4 would probably have been the best choice. But just to be safe, I included the applied dominance of each. Just to let you in. Then we have section B, which technically begins here. B is in B major. Well, the first time. B is just a very long 1-pedal chord. A really long 1-pedal chord. B begins here. But don't worry, we go back to E here. I mean, technically E, the P pivot should have been here. But the difference between the B and the B development is a little too tricky to figure out. So I decided that just for the sake of demonstrating how we move back, I would make this place the place where we pivot to E instead of this. So then A returns, except A's only really developed. It's only really developed in the right hand, as you can see. Then the A development returns. Honestly, they didn't really develop a lot on the A development. Then we have D. D isn't really a part so much as a continuation of the A and the A and the B part. Like it's literally just a continuation of that before we get led into the reprise of B. So it's only ever in E minor. Yeah. Until finally, you think we're going somewhere else, but we go, guess what? We're actually going to E major now. And then this is the B variation. It's the same thing, except it's in E major instead of B major. And mostly everything is the same, except this time we actually end on a 1 chord. We do draw it out a bit, but we end on 1. And finally, I will talk about the structure of the Nocturne OP15 number 3 in G minor. That's this one. So this one actually has a pretty easy structure, but that's not saying much. That's probably the easiest thing about this piece. So we have an A section that begins bar 1, full pickup beat, actually characteristic of mazurkas, but I'll get into that. So, okay, so it basically just, it continues to be A for a really long time up until bar 25, where now this is technically where the A, yeah, by the way, it goes through two keys. So it's in G minor and it goes to D minor here, generously speaking. It's a really bad pivot 1-4, but like, you know it's in D minor due to the cadential. Oh, and this thing. I'll get into that. But the way to pivot backwards, the way to pivot back to G minor is so weird. It's with a F dominant 7 chord, as you can see here. I didn't know how to class that in terms of D minor, so I just wrote applied dominant of major 6. But I do know that they were definitely trying for a German 6-5 in G minor. You know, and harmonically speaking. A German 6-5 that goes to the 5 in first inversion. But yeah. Then we go back to the, and then in measure 25 we go back to A development section. Nothing changes, chordally speaking, except the melody. But, I'm still very confused, but yeah, still very confused here, but it doesn't matter. Then we go to B section. You could say this is actually a transition between the two sections, but considering this piece is it's not rounded or ternary, so honestly, it's a section in of itself. It is. It goes to many keys, and not in the best, and not the most conventional ways. It has a weird diminished pivot to G major, I believe it's G major. It has a cadential that lets you know it's G major, so it's G major. We have a little nice long chord here. Then we go to F sharp major. The piece never actually makes it clear where in F sharp major we are going, so I assume that they meant for us to pivot on the minor 3 first inversion to minor 4 first inversion. Not the best pivot, I know. I could have pivoted on this one, but I couldn't tell. And I was alright, especially with the chord that follows it. The chord that follows it is even worse, so I honestly didn't know it was in F sharp major until it was too late. Then eventually we pivot back to F major, very surprising, with a little weird mixture pivot. Finally, this piece ends in a 5 chord, thank God. And then we have, like, the pivot is like a 5 to a flat major 6 chord. You know, obviously mixture pivot here. So yeah, then part C happens, and it's mostly in F major. We go from F to D here, only for convenience's sake. I honestly couldn't tell if this was the right idea, but I believe so. Then we go back to the F, and we repeat, that's, like, 4 to 2 is not the best pivot, but the other 2 keys were kind of hard for me to write. Let's see, then we go back to D, same way. And then instead of return to F, we go to A minor. Very lazy way. Also very brief, because it goes back to F major, then D minor, and then we repeat this with A minor, F major, D minor. But instead of going back to A, we go to G minor. Finally. G minor is right here. And we technically end the piece in G minor, except we don't quite end in G minor because there's a tierce de Picardy right here. That is very characteristic of Chopin. Alright, so that's what I've talked about for the structure of the pieces. Now I should probably go over the harmonic procedures. This is going to be fun. Let's start with Nocturne OP9 number 2. I may have touched a bit briefly on many of the harmonic procedures, but I don't think, but I have definitely not covered them in depth, so here we go. So Chopin's Nocturne OP9, that opens in E flat major with this is like one of those pedal flat 6/4 5/3 extensions, and that's the first example of modal mixture we get. More to come, definitely. Then we get this chord, which I believe is a applied dominant 4/2 of 4. Although to be fair, the D flat in the bass is the only thing that makes it, because otherwise the chord is just a 1. Then we have more applied dominance, and then we have this, which is eventually revealed to just be a flat 6/4 5/3 extension of 2. I didn't know 2 chords could have an extension, but no, I'm happy. Yeah, the minor 2 got an extension. Okay, so then we have more applied dominance here and applied diminished. Then we repeat this process in the development section of A. Like, all of what I just said is repeated. Then we go on to B section. We pivot as I said, we pivot very soon to B flat major. Then we have an applied major 4, then an applied minor 4 in succession of the 4 chord, which I thought was neat. Definitely a characteristic of Chopin. He used to do this all the time. Then we have an applied diminished 7 and an applied dominant. Then we have a 13, 12, 13. God, what is wrong with my eyesight? 13, 12, 13 of the dominant, and so I don't actually know if that's supposed to be 13, 12, 13, but I assume so based on the way it was written. Then we have a very, very, very quick pivot back to E flat major, the 1/5 pivot, with an applied dominant of the flat 2, Neapolitan 6. I've circled it even if you can't see it, but yeah, this chord is it. And then we have an applied dominant of an applied dominant of the dominant. That was pretty neat. And yeah, by the way, all of this is like the chromatic. As I said before, it's the notes in this have a chromatic ascending and descending passage. And then we're led right back to A. So basically, the B part is the same, like exactly the same next time it returns, and harmonically speaking, so is the A part. I think we should go to the extended coda. The extended coda happens here. It happens on the 1 pedal. It's the pedal cadential of like it's 1 pedal like here, but it goes to flat 6/4, back to 5/3, then it happens again. And we have a bit of extensions. We have an applied dominant here, and then we have I think this is chromaticisms. It doesn't stop. Sorry, it doesn't stop there. It stops note before. But yeah, I could kind of tell when I played it. And then we have a minor 4 in between the ones. Nice little, it's right here. It's a nice little plagal progression. We got another minor 4. And then we have, if you recognize this, I'm putting the link in the description, but if you recognize this, near the end of the piece, all these applied dominants are that's literally just the end progression of part A, and every instance of part A. So then we have a bunch of chromatic repetition here, and that eventually resolves to 1. Then we have Nocturne in E minor. This is the second piece, OP 72 number 1. So as I said, I think I've talked a bit about the key changes, how it goes, I've talked a bit about that because the key changes are inexorably tied to to the parts of the thing. They are, really. They're tied much more than most of these pieces. So we have an applied diminished here, as I said. We have this chord, which I believe is a German 6. No, I thought it was an Italian 6 chord, but it also could be a German. The notes are E sharp, G, B, D. Well, okay, no, E sharp, G, B. There is a D that appears in the chord, but considering that the movement of the bass is in triplets, like do 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 do, I actually thought that it was only the first note of the triplets that mattered. So that's why I wrote it as Italian 6, but it could also be a German 6-5 if you think that the D in this thing is if you think the D in this thing is part of the chord. I do not. That's why I wrote it as Italian, but you know, it could be. It is also enharmonic, by the way, more or less. Okay, I think I've talked about this, but there's an applied diminished. There was a bit of chromaticism here for sharp free free. More applied diminishes here. Oh, I talked about this one. As I said before, there's an implied dominant of the flat 2, which transitions into C major. I talked about the applied dominance here and here. I talked about this and how it's not modal mixture because this is B minor at this point. I talked about the applied dominant. I talked about the flat 9-8-7 little thing and how I can tell there's a passing 6-4. I think I've covered here everything. So I don't know if I talked about this, but there's an implied dominant of 4 over the pedal. Talk about that. Then there's what I couldn't tell here is the progression. So this is over the pedal. There is a diminished chord, then a 1, then a 1 5 3 flat 6 4 5 3 progression, and then I believe another diminished before it goes to the flat 6 4 5 3 resolution. I thought that was neat. We got another in the applied dominant. There is a 9-8 suspension. As I said before, I chose to pivot here just for brevity's sake, and to emphasize the difference between B and B development. So that's 6-5 on the 4. There's no applied diminished of this one. Yeah. A lot of more applied diminished here and here. More modal mixture here because this piece doesn't know whether or not it's in major or minor mode. Major definitely here, minor here. By the way, we got the 7 first inversion triads and the diminished triads. They're beautiful. We got the chromaticism here. I said 4 sharp free, natural free. I think I talked about this, but you know, passing 6-4, the applied diminished, then we modulate to major mode with the little modal mixture here. By the way, all of this in the B variation is almost exactly the same as the first B variation, except there's no pivot, and here this is less of diminished. It's less of going back and forth between diminished and such, and more of this little pattern. So I counted it as modal mixture. However, this is diminished. And then we end. Time to talk about Nocturne OP15 number 3. I do not like this one. So we have a bunch of applied dominants here. Here I could, after the pivot to D minor, I couldn't decide what this was. I didn't know if it was an augmented passing chord in between the cadential, or if it was an 8, sharp 7, natural 7 thing, or what it was. I talked about the 15th. Yeah, I think I talked about most of this. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one. I think I talked about this. I talked about this one, definitely. But I believe the 898 was a nice touch here. And my favorite is the cadential that was broken up by a common tone diminished 7th and common tone German 7th in the middle of it. Yep, definitely talked about all of this. And there's an applied diminished 7th and 4/3 that goes to 2. That was interesting. That was the 8/9. I think I talked about half diminished in those two. The octatonic sequence. This is apparently, out of all the Chopin pieces, this is the only other one that does an octatonic sequence. I had never learned about this in the course, so I thought it was quite interesting when I looked it up. And yeah, this is just, the reason they do this octatonic sequence is because they're doing it with diminished 7s. Not exactly related to the key, they just want to go down. That eventually resolve to the diminished, the applied diminished chord of 5, with the little 4/3 suspension. I thought the blatant use of German chords and German 4/3 was a bit much, but I knew that he definitely had to end this some way, and you could tell he didn't know how, because we got a bit of an enharmonic modulation here, where the C sharp goes to D flat, goes to C. That's what makes us go into F major. As you can see, I've written this as the chorale part. C is not for chorale, C is just for, this is C, like this is the third part. Yeah, having the Chopin Nocturne in the 3-part form is unusual, even for Chopin. It's actually quite strange. I believe I've talked about this, but wait, no. So we have a bit of 13, 12, 13s here. Yeah, like, I think Chopin really likes to do that. It doesn't resolve to 1 though. It happens again later down in the piece, because this piece repeats itself without, I could say it has a deviation, but that would probably be incorrect. I'll say this. Being able to pivot on 2 to 4 out of 2 minor keys is not fun. It's not the best pivot, but it would do. Let's see. Wait, sorry. I'll say this. The 6/4 pivots are not bad. The 8/7 suspensions and the applied diminished of a minor 3 is kind of, I thought it was a little overkill, but okay. Well, there's a bit of modal mixture that did. There was one good bit of modal mixture. Good. Decent. So over here, like, this is in like the 4th pattern of the C section. So we're in D minor again, as this piece can't make up its mind. So we have a bit of we go to major 1, and then minor 4, and then major 1. It doesn't do much. Nothing really comes of this, because it resolves back to an applied chord of the 3 again. But it's just setting you up for what's going to happen at the very end. Let's see. Got a bit more diminished, applied diminished chords, and we finally, as I mentioned before, I thought it was quite nice, but I thought it was quite nice that they decided to pivot back to G minor, but it was only for a few bars, so yeah, like the chord progression is literally just minor 1, minor 4, 5 of 4 free, major 1. Picardy third. It's a little unusual. I'm not gonna lie. It's very unusual. So now I believe I'm supposed to talk about the characteristics of a Chopin nocturne and how these either follow or do not follow. I've already covered the harmonic procedures, so I believe that is good. But now I'm going to actually talk about the structure. Well, let's start with Nocturne OP9 number 2. You know, the famous one. In E flat major. Well, this one, yeah. The first one is actually in ternary form that's typical for a Chopin nocturne. It really is. Like, most of his nocturnes are actually in ternary form. Although, depending on who you ask, it could also be considered a two-parter form, with A being measure 1 to 20, and B being measures 21 to 37. I do not. I consider it very much a ternary form. It follows the rondo pattern that was popular in the Romantic era, with an extended coda that kind of incorporates elements of both section B and section A. I guess you could say theme B is a continuation of Act A, but I don't think so. This one is very, very reliant on the melody. You can tell right in the very first rendition of the melody that it is definitely about to do it. He has a little Chopin pattern of going up minor first, do 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 do, like that. But I believe this is trying to reflect the. It's also an arpeggiation, which is also what he's known for. And over the piece de chords, he puts in a lot of little ornamentations, cadenzas. Yeah, I believe that having chromatic scales is also very big, especially, but only one of them, this one, is ever used as a transitional point. Most of them are just very ornamental. Like, see, this is a good example of him arpeggiating. And then there's one of him doing an actual chromatic scale this time. Yeah. I'd say this piece is a perfect example of Chopin's pattern, because he loved to embellish stuff, he loved to put in a lot of cadenzas, a lot of chromatic scales, a lot of runs and trills, and we have a good portion of that. Except they all appear in A or in the coda. See? We got more chromaticism here, but then we also got a lot of fun little, then we got a lot of runs from the scale. More runs. We got a bit of chromaticism here. Like, I think this might be chromatic scale. I think. It's very brief. This one is definitely an embellishment of the chord. And these ones, that's definitely a chromatic, descending chromatics. And these ones are literally just the same repeated pattern that Chopin is very much known for. Overall, I'd say this piece really follows the patterns that he does, like the ornamental patterns that he does in the right hand, which Chopin is very much known for that. And he's also known for having, his pieces being ternary form. That's another check. He's known for incorporating a lot of applied dominance. He's known for having, he's known for having grand flourishes and a lot of pedal sequences. Yeah, that provide a lot of modal mixture. Yeah, I'd say this one definitely follows the structure of Chopin. Oh, and it's also in triple meter. Yeah. It's in triple meter, and you play in triplets. That was very characteristic of Chopin. Like, very. Also, I'd like to say wide leaps in the melody line is pretty big as well. Overall, this piece is the most reliant on melody. It's not very, some people say that wouldn't be very ambitious, but you'll see. Now we're going to talk about what makes this one. Nocturne in E minor, OP 72, number 1. Chopin wrote this when he was 17. I would say this doesn't completely follow his patterns. It really doesn't. I would say that it only follows some of them. Like, there is a lot of pedal chords. Yeah, a lot of pedal extensions. And it's in like triplets, but in a bass. But this one is actually in 4/4, which that's not too common for Chopin's nocturnes, although other works maybe. Let's see. It has one thing that I had trouble classing as either German or Italian, but you can definitely tell that's an augmented 6. It's fun. It has a bit. It flirts in with in and out of keys a lot. So you can't really tell what is what often, but you know. But it always returns to E minor or whatever section it's in. That's just for the A section, by the way. It's odd. You'd think that the A development section would have more development. I mean, it kind of does. It has the octaves. He was known for doing octaves in the right hand. You can tell. And it has a bit of descending chromatic scales along with descending thirds. Yeah, descending thirds pop up a few times. Yeah, descending notes. So. But, a very common pattern is 5, applied diminish 7 of 5. It's so common. I gotta say, the modal mixture pivot of flat 2 to 1 was quite interesting. Especially because this is one of the few Chopin nocturnes that is not in ternary form. There's only like a handful of them, and this is one of the few that is not in ternary form. Ergo, I thought it would be more interesting to do. The melody line is definitely not elaborated upon yet, but trust me. It doesn't return in octaves quite yet. It's still very chordal at this point. Although I thought the pivoting, I didn't think that he chose very good ways to pivot. I actually didn't think these were very strong pivots, but I did think that, you know, maybe I was analyzing it wrong. Although I definitely know it went to C major and back. So then yeah, I thought that the use of flat 9, 8, 7 was okay, but I don't really know if he was going for that. That's just my speculation. Then we get to B. We get the ascending thirds again, which is a very popular theme of his. Oh, and a little. Yep. Then we get this. Then finally, when we return to theme A, or at least the development of it, we get massive elaborations. Although, to be fair, he was only 17, so he hadn't fully established the style yet. We get a bit of an E minor run, more E minor run, more of that. We got an arpeggiation of this diminished chord. We got a B melodic minor. We got more chromatic scales, definitely descending here. We got a lot of trills. He loves trills. Then we return to development of A, and you'd expect it to be more development, but no, there's not much more. We got octaves again. I mean, the octaves are just offbeat, and there's a bit of chromaticism, but like they have not really changed at all. I gotta say, and the melody line isn't very fluid in this piece, not at all. And I guess you could argue that theme B is literally just a continuation of the first part. Especially because the development of theme B is literally just the same thing, but in a tonic key, in a tonic major, you know, E major. It's in 2-part song form, technically. I mean, I argue that C is its own part because there's literally a key change. Even if it's brief, it's a key change to C major and back. However, I can see if I don't really know if D is actually. I'm not sure if D is its own theme because it's literally just. It's just a way to prolong. It's literally just a way to prolong what happened in the Return of A before it goes to the B variation. That's literally it. I'd say it is only heavily reliant on the melody whenever the themes are settled. But the melody is always in chords. So this is, yeah. It's not very, it's more of, yeah, I guess you could say it's reliant on the melody, but only partially reliant on the melody, because the bass figures are very involved in pedals. I'd also like to say that sometimes the melody actually is like offbeat triplet patterns. I thought that was interesting. You don't see that a lot in Chopin. Finally, I'm going to talk about the Nocturne Op. 15 number 3 in G minor. This one. So Theme A is this is the only other Nocturne that is not in ternary form. I mean, I probably should have prefaced that. Yeah. So that also makes it unusual, but the real unusual theme, as I've mentioned, is that it's actually in 3 parts. That's unusual for Chopin in general. And unlike this one, it's not very reliant on the melody. It kind of just changes keys on a whim. Well, starting with A. The section A is, I call this the mazurka part, because this is actually very heavily influenced by Chopin's mazurkas. I actually thought it was a mazurka the first time I played. Like, Chopin actually, he was Polish. He wrote mazurkas all the time. And mazurkas always have, like, they have an 8-beat pattern when they first start, like, do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. And they're always in triple meter. So I thought that was interesting. What wasn't interesting was how they kept changing do-do-do-do-do-do. They kept changing what happened in the left hand. That actually made it a great deal more trickier because even though, as I said, I played mazurkas, but I am not the best at them. It's still not very reliant on melody because, as I said before, Section A does return, but even the melody is not very much elaborated upon. Like, I guess you could see elements of Chopin here. Like, I guess you could say this is a bit of elaboration. But that's as far as it goes. That's really as far as it goes. I guess you could say that, the melody is, for the first half of Part B, the melody is not really what drives the piece. Do, 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 do. But, like, it's more like of the keys that it chooses to belong to, because it really waffles in and out of these a lot. And it does have a do. It still has the mazurka. It still has the mazurka melody going on. Do. It really does, but and even though you hear do, you're still wondering what is going on. Is this the development section? But then it goes do, starting at this measure. Yeah. Measure 65 is where it all starts. Do. That foreshadows what's going to happen. Then they elaborate on by going do as the piece climbs higher and higher and higher until finally we get to the autotonic sequence. And you actually think this piece is going to go somewhere amazing. No. It just silently fades into the chorale part. C. C is, apart from the 13, 12, 13 extensions and the soprano, part C is not reliant on a melody. It is very much a very chordal. It is a very chordal thing. There's no triple meter, as you'll see in the bass. There's no triple meter. It's always It's not very fun. It's always just solid blocked chords. Like, I guess you have the neighbor chord, the passing neighbor chords. Maybe, yeah, maybe the neighbor tones kind of count. But yeah. And it only, yeah, the only way you can tell that this is the same piece at the end is when they finally return to G minor and they have Chopin's famous Tierce de Picardy at the end. It's a very slow piece after that. Yeah. Yeah. I think the sad thing about this is that it doesn't really have any arpeggios at all within the piece. And that makes it feel much more stilted. Oh, and here's a fun fact. Once you get, upon developing the religioso section for this nocturne, Chopin actually called it At the Cemetery after watching a piece from Hamlet, but then he changed his mind, he crossed it and he wrote, "Let them figure it out for themselves." I think that kind of shows what he was trying to go for. Trust me, I was having a hard time. But you can tell that he was influenced by like a single melodic line, except not in this one because except for the last one because it seems so dull. Anyways, that like Nocturne Op. 15 number 3 is probably the least like Chopin's nocturnes, with its only real Chopin nocturne hallmarks being the Tierce de Picardy, the occasional modal mixture, the chromatic scales occasionally. But yeah, otherwise it's very much like a mazurka that turns into a chorale. I feel tricked. Anyways, I believe that I've fully covered everything that I was talking about, and I hope this wasn't too long. And I will see you later. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.